we're going to begin our study of Yevamos, and we started last week the parak called Mitzvahs Chalitza. So I'll ask you to open up to Daf Kuf Aleph Amid Beis. And there we will see the Gemara. Maybe I just thought of it now. Maybe we should review a little bit of what we did last week so we could have an easy takeoff. So take a look on Kuf Aleph Amid Aleph, and we'll look at the Gemara. The Gemara says that the Mishnah has a strange language. It says that Chalitza has to take place in front of 3 dayanim, and then it says afilu shloshta edyotos. Umeachad afilu shlosha edyotos dayanim lamali. Why do you bother mentioning dayanim? You don't even need dayanim. You can have edyotos, rank and file members of the community. So hakamashmalan tibeinan bishlosha shiyodim lahakros ke'ein dayanim. Although they are three men that walk the streets, but there is a minimum amount of knowledge that they have to achieve and be like dayanim in one respect, and that is sheyodea likros. He has to be able to read the psukim in the Torah with regard to chalitza. Chalitza requires a reading of the psukim, and these 3 adyotos making up a tribunal, they will feed the Yavam and the Yevama, right? The Choletz and the Mischal and the Choletzes, they will feed them those words from the Parsha to guarantee that the Kriya is read properly. Now we get to a debate about how many judges or members do we have of this group in front of which there will be chalitzas taking place. The Tanna Kama says 3, and Rabbi Yehuda says 5. By time of the Tanna Kama, why does the Tanna Kama maintain that 3 is enough? The Sanya, the pasuk says, again, all the psukim here are from the Parsha of Chalitza, which is in Parshas Kiteitzei Dvarim Per Kafei, and the pasuk says we also Yevimto Ashara El HaZikenim. Zikenim in plural means 2, Shnayim. But the Ein Bezdin Shakul, but we cannot have an even number of members on the court, and therefore we have to add a 3rd member, and now we have 3. And therefore, Mosifet Aleim Odechad Arekan Shlosh Rabbi Yehuda, Shnayim Zkenim, and then another Shnayim. We need Ziknei and Zkenim. Ziknei teaches me Shnayim, Zkenim another Shnayim, that's 4, and then we have to add a 5th to make sure that it's not a Bezdin Shakul. Gemara asks, what does the Tanna Kama do with the word Ziknei? And Miboile, he needs it l'rebuye nafilu v'shlosha edyotos. It's paradoxical, but because the Torah repeated the words Zkenim Ziknei, it's coming to tell you that you don't need Zkenim. There's a ribui of someone who's not really a Zaken. He's not fit or suitable to sit as a diet. For Rabbi Yehuda Yotus Minole, where does Rabbi Yehuda derive the conclusion that you don't need dayanim after it says zikenim? Nafkale li'ene hazkenim. The pasuk says v'niksha yevimto elov li'ene hazkenim. So the Gemara now tries to analyze what did Rabbi Yehuda see in the word li'ene in front of the eyes of this Canaan. How would that prove that hedyotos are fine? You could suffice. You don't need Canaan. The Gemara says the Omar Mar li'ene prat l'sumin. The pasuk is excluding or disqualifying sumin, blind people. Now wait a second. If you need dayanim, then forget about sumin. Sumin are not dayanim. Itzrich li'ene lemute sumin shmamino dafilu idiota. Stisa gadaitoch Sanhedrin be'ino. We need members of the court, dayanim, full-fledged dayanim. Then lamali lebute sumin. Why would the Torah have to add the word li'ene to exclude and disqualify sumin? We have it from Tani Rav Yosef Nafka. Tani Rav Yosef, Ishem Bezdin Menukim B'Tzedek, Kach Bezdin Menukim be called Mum. Then in order to sit on a Sanhedrin as a Dayan, you have to have a complete body. All the limbs of your body are functional. You're not a Baal Mum. And how do we know this? Shenemar, and here we're turning to the Kuf Aleph Amid Beis, Kilach Kulach Yafer Ayasi Mum Ein Bach. And this pasuk is referring to the Sanhedrin, and that Rashi says because it says Rayasi. Rayasi is an allusion, a reference to the Sanhedrin, and the pasuk says Mum Ein Bach. So again, let's go over the logic of Rabbi Yehuda. If the word liene is coming to disqualify sumin, why do I need the word liene? After all, I would disqualify sumin because a dayan cannot be a balmu, and they're excluded because we need dayanim. The answer is we don't need dayanim. If we don't need dayanim, all we need is hedyotos. And if all we need is hedyotos, perhaps we could use even sumin. So for that, I need the pasuk liene. But the implication of liene is that a summa could serve in order to, how should I say, execute a chalitza in their presence, and we don't need hedyotos. What about the Tanakama? He derives halacha that you don't need dayanim from the word zikne. What is he going to do with the word liene? You already know from zikne that you don't need dayanim. And hedyotos are fine. Is hahu liene my ovidle. Now here, I want to share with you the insight of the Yam Shel Shlomo. He writes, "Vesuma posel nilmad heyos umarbim dayanim hedyotos mizikne ulolo ze ayinu lomdim shetzarch dayanim sanhedrin imkein marbim shetzarich hedyotos aval gabi mum tzrichen lios kedayone sanhedrin." So if I understand correctly, there seems to be some sort of a middle category here, midway between dayanim and hedyotos. We have a ribui from the word zikne, that even hedyotos can serve, but we started with the premise that you need sanhedrin. This halacha that you can have even hedyotos doesn't mean that we are completely removing these hedyotos from the status of Sanhedrin. To some extent, they are similar to Sanhedrin. They have to have a certain knowledge, and not only that, they cannot be Balei Mumin. So if we know to exclude Balei Mumin, like Sumin, is then we ask the question, who li'ene mayavid? What do we do with the word li'ene? Who lichidaravu diasav rava tzriche dayana lemichse ruka the kanafik mipuma Yevamot. So from the word liene, we derive the conclusion that the dayanim must see the rok, the spit, that she, the Yevamah, spits, and that's based on the pasuk liene as kenavi idach nami. So Rabbi Yehuda, doesn't he need the word liene to teach us that the dayanim have to see her spit? And yet Rabbi Yehuda used the word liene to derive the conclusion that even hedyotos are acceptable. So the Gemara says, the boile, just 1 second, the idach nami, according to Rabbi Yehuda, who derives from the word liene that we should exclude sumin, A minute. What's the Gemara's question now? Just give me a minute here. Idach Nami, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda derived from the Ene. To exclude Suman. So what's Gemara asking now? Don't we need Li'ene to teach me that the Dayan have to see the spit? Is V'idach Nami? Oh, I understand. V'idach Nami, and Rabbi Yehuda, how can he use Li'ene to exclude Suman? Don't we need Li'ene to exclude Dayanim who are not capable of seeing the spit? So this is all part of the Gemara's kasha. So how could Rabbi Yehuda derive head yotos? Einochinami. He needs liene for Rava. El head yotos minole nafkale mi b'Yisrael. The pasuk says, "The also yevimto hashara el azkenim v'omra meina yevami lahakim liachim shem b'Yisrael." And when it says mein yevami lahakim liachim shem, and now it says be Yisrael, which seems to be a superfluous word. It's coming to teach you, Yisrael Koldu, that she's coming in front of any sort of Bezdin of Yisrael, even in front of Hedyotos. The Idach, and what does the Tanakama do with Hi Yisrael, my Ovidle? After all, he derives Hedyotos from Zikne. So what's he going to do with the word Yisrael, which is a redundant word? Mi boile lechdi Tanit Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yehuda be Yisrael be Bezdin shall Yisrael v'lo be Bezdin shall Gerim. So this pasuk be Yisrael is coming to exclude Gerim. Now Gerim means that either his father or his mother were Gerim. So it means that even if his parents, one of his parents converted before he was born, nevertheless he's excluded under the word Yisrael to serve for Chalitza. The Idach, and Rabbi Yehuda, who uses the word Yisrael to teach me that even Dayanim Hedyotos are kosher for Chalitza. How does he know that Chalitza requires a Bezdin Shel Yisrael Lafuke Gerim? And the answer is Be Yisrael Achrini Ksiv. Right? It says the word Be Yisrael twice. First, we have it in the pasuk of the also Yevimta Shara Lahakim Shem Be Yisrael, and then we have another pasuk that says V'nikra Shmo Be Yisrael Beis Chalutz Anar. The Idach and the Tanakama that derives from Yisrael. What does the Tanakama derive from the pasuk V'nikra Shmo Be Yisrael? Because the first Yisrael we need to exclude a Bezdin of Gerin. So the Gemara answers, "Mi boile l'chasanya of Rabbi Yehuda pamachas hayinu yoshvim l'fnei Rabbi Tarfon, uba yevimto yevamu lachlotz. The Omar Lanu, Rabbi Tarfon told us, anu kulchem chalutz hanal." That when it says in the pasuk, "V'nikra shmo b'Yisrael beis chalutz hanal," it means that the members of the court have to declare Beis Chalutz Hanal. Here I have a note that Kulchem Chalutz Hanal. Anu Kulchem. What does it mean, Anu Kulchem? It means Hakahal Halimtzaim B'Chalitza. Anyone who is present at the time of Chalitza should respond Beis Chalutz Hanal, not just the Dayan. The Idach, what was Rabbi Yehuda After all, he used V'nikra Shmo B'Yisrael to teach us that it's a Bezdin Shel Yisrael and not a Bezdin Shel Gerim. How is he going to derive this halacha that those who are standing and present here at the time of Chalitza, they should respond Beis Chalutz Hanal? The Gemara answers, V'nikra Nafka. It says V'nikra Shmo, and they will call out his name. And that's teaching me that they have to call out that he's a Beis Chalutz Hanal. Gemara asks, now that we darshan the word Ziknei in the pasuk v'karu lo Ziknei iro v'dibru elo. And we're not going to say that Ziknei is not for drasha, but rather it's telling you that this Kanim that are written here in the beginning of the Parashat V'Elsivim Tasharel as Kanim. And we could darshan this pasuk v'karu and v'dibru to teach us v'karu shnayim, that we need two, v'dibru shnayim, and hachinami, if we have that drasha, then Rabbi Yehuda holds that Chalitza requires 5 dayanim, then arekan tisha, u'Rabbanan arekan shiva. So in other words, the original number of 3 or 5, we're going to now add another 4. So 3 plus 4 becomes 7, and 4 plus 5 becomes 9. So the Gemara is now asking, once you're darshaning from the word ziknei in the pasuk v'karolo ziknei iro v'dibru elov, so now we should darshan the word v'karu and the word v'dibru, and v'karu shnayim and v'dibru shnayim. The Gemara answers, hahu, those words v'karu v'dibru miboyle l'chasanya, we need it for a brisa. Okay, so let's take a break here from the brisa for a minute, and I want to share with you something from the Yalkut Bi'urim page. The Gemara says that a summa is disqualified from serving on the Bezdin of Chalitza. And now the Minchas Chinuch wants to know what happens if the summa was, first he was normal, he had eyesight, Baruch Hashem, and he was appointed to the Sanhedrin, and then he became a summa. And the Minchas Chinuch says in such a case, he's possible. Avol b'dinei mamenos, shesuma posel, hainu, b'shas hasmicha, tzarech lios roy. Avol im nismach kvar, v'achakach nistama, afterwards he became blind, arei hu kosher. So it means that a dayan who became blind never can still sit on a Sanhedrin. However, he cannot preside over Chalitza, because in the case of Chalitza, the Torah says li'ene. Even though he was already appointed to the Sanhedrin before he became blind. Now, there's another interesting psul of a dayan as a balmum and that's Misha Kolo Ove. He has a very strange, harsh voice. And Rashi says that, so Rashi Masechet Sota, that Moshe Rabbeinu himself was posel avodas levia ki kolo ove. And the Aruch LaNer writes that a treifa might be better than a balmum and he's kosher. Fascinating. We would say a treifa is going to die. He is certainly the most profound manifestation of a balmum. But the Aruch LaNer, he wavers back and forth, but he presents a possibility that a treifa might be in a better shape than a balmum. I guess because on the outside he seems to be fine. You don't see any of his inner injuries. Omar Rava, tzricha dayanim lemechse roka, t'siv li ene azkena v'yarka. Now, the words tzriche implies that b'di'evet, if they didn't see the rok, then the chalitza would still be kosher. And the Amshel Shlomo writes that there's no need even to repeat the entire ritual of chalitza with another eureka so that the dayanim on the second round will see it. It's not necessary. However, the Amshel Shlomo quotes the Maharil, and he says, "Tzarech lachzor v'lirok." We need another eureka. And that's because this is a drasha gemura. Li'ene means they have to see it. Okay. Now, we said that we excluded a bezdin of gerim. Would be Yisrael Hasheni lomdim shekola am onim chalutza na. Rabbi Yehuda shem be Yisrael Rishon lomdim shafed yotos ksherim lidayone hachalitza. Maybe Yisrael Hasheni bebezdin shel Yisrael v'lo bebezdin shel gerim. Umismichus v'nikra shmo b'Yisrael lomdim shekola am onim chalutza na. V'hine Gemara b'Kiddushin lo meres shebi b'Yisrael echad lomdim bebezdin shel Yisrael v'lo bebezdin shel gerim b'Yisrael hasheni lomdim shekeven shecholza liyavam hutra yavam linase lechol Yisrael. So what does that mean, lechol Yisrael? Umismichus v'nikra shmo b'Yisrael lomdim shekolam onim chalutza now. Tamua, shenimsa shagmar b'kiddushin, lo soveres lilmod lo kitanakam v'gam lo Rabbi Yehuda. V'chein tomea, minayin lomdu tanakam of Rabbi Yehuda shekevan shecholza nal muteres li nasei l'chol Yisrael. So Tosfos wants to suggest that the Gemara Kiddushin is of the opinion that the Rabbanon of Rabbi Yehuda, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the entire congregation has to recite Beis Chalutz Hanal because the Pasuk V'Nikra is right near Nikra Shmo B'Yisrael. The Rabbanon likewise derived from the smichus that we need the word B'Yisrael here to teach me that the Am has to respond Beis Chalutza now. Al Zeh Ba Gemara B'Kiddushin Lomar B'Yisrael from the pasuk B'Yisrael Lomdim Shekemen Techolza Nalo Hutra L'Chol Yisrael. Rabbi Yehuda Shehitzrich Tevas B'Yisrael Amayit Bezdin Shel Gerim Lomed Adin Shekemen Shechol Hutra Linos L'Chol Yisrael Mizeh Nichtav Pasuk V'Nikra Shmo B'Yisrael Beis Chalutz Hanal V'lo Kasuv U B'Yisrael Yikarei Shmo beis chalutz hanal, l'lamdenu shatorah smicha teves b'Yisrael, lechalutz hanal, l'lamdenu shekemet shecholza, hutra linase lechol adam. So she's allowed to get married after the public declares beis chalutz hanal. In other words, once she implements the chalitza and takes off his shoe, that itself is matir her at that moment to marry any Jew. I mean, we'll see about a Kohen, but okay. So those are a few points that I wanted to share with you from the Yalkut Habir. Now we go back to our drasha here on Daf Kuf Aleph Amid Beis, and the Gemara says, "Miboile, what do we need? V'karu v'dabru, because we're not adding another 4 dayanim to the required chalitza. Miboile l'chisanya, the Torah says, "V'karu lo ziknei iro v'dibru elov v'amad v'amar lo chafatzti l'kachta." V'karu lo. Here's a question whether you have the gersa hein. Malame shedayore bezdin atzmam yikru lifnei hayavam es ha'etza. As we'll see later on, what the etza is, velo shluchon. That's something that the dayanim have to do personally. The dabru elov malame shemasiyin lo etza genes lo. That they will guide him in a way that's appropriate to him. She'im hayahu yeled, if the yavam is a young boy, meaning he's like bar mitzvah age, he's zakena, and she's older, or who's zaken if, let's say, it's an older brother, so he's much older. The he yalda, and she's a young woman. Omrim lo bezin will say to Malacha Eitzel Yaldo, you're a zaken, don't marry a young woman. And don't be Mekayim the mitzvah of Yibum. Or if the Yavam is too young and she's older, Malacha Eitzel Zkena. Klach Eitzel Shekmoscha. Go marry a young woman like your own age. The Altachnis Totol Etof Beischa. Because if you marry a woman and there's such a great gap in the age, that doesn't bear well for the relationship. It will bring Tata B'toch Habayis. Tata meaning, dissension and contention. And the Shulchan Aruch writes in Even Ezer, Simanai and Beis, that Nisue Bacharus Kena o Zaken Vialda Mevili De Znus. But if he insists that he wants to be kind the mitzvah of Yibum, we cannot prevent him from doing so. Just try to give him an eitzah. Omar Rav Nachman, Alocha Chalitza B'Shlosha. Asking like the Tanakama, that all you need is 3 dayanim for a chalitza. Oil the sasam one tana kavosai. As we look at our Mishnah, it's a stam Mishnah like the Tanakama, because the Mishnah says that the chalitza is bishlosha. Amalei Rabba or Rava the Rav Nachman, Ihachi, if you're paskening like a stam Mishnah regarding chalitza, is miyun nami. We should also require miyun in the presence of 3 dayanim. because we have a Stam Mishnah that requires 3 dayanim in the case of Miyun. Miyun is a case where the father of this girl died, and one of her brothers or her mother marries her off. That's called Kedushay Miyun. And again, she's a Ketana. Kisnan, we learned in the Mishnah, Miyun v'chalitza b'shlosha. So Miyun now is going to require 3 dayanim because of this principle called Halacha Kistam Mishnah. Maybe you'll tell me that Miyun does require 3. But Sanya, we have a brisa, Miyun, Beit Shammai Omrim, Bezdin Mumche. We need a Bezdin made up of experts, expert dayanim. So they shouldn't make any mistakes here and come to be matir, even in a case of a Ketana who was married off by her father, where she needs a get. She's a full-fledged HSC. Beis Hillel Omrim, that Miyun should take place by Bezdin Mumchim or Shalom by Bezdin Mumchim. In other words, Beit Shammai was the one who required Bezdin Mumchim for Miyun, but Beis Hillel are much more laid back about it, and any Bezdin will do. We're not afraid that anyone's going to make a mistake and be a machshir, kana, shisia, or via. We don't worry about that. Everybody knows that that's Kiddushin Torah, Shel Torah. Elu ve'elu modim. Both Beis Hillel and Beit Shammai agree shetzarech shlosha, that for Miyun we need 3 dayanim. However, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi, machshirim b'shnayim. All you need is 2 dayanim. The Amar Rabbi Yehuda bar Minyomi, Amar Rav Nachman, halacha ki oso hazug. Meaning that all you need is 2 dayanim for Miyun. So it seems that Rav Nachman himself does not accept a Stam Mishnah with regard to Miyun, because we have the Mishnah in Sanhedrin that says Hamiyun Bishlosha. So how do we reconcile the fact that as far as the issue of Hedyotos, of how many men have to sit on the court, we're going to go with our Mishnah here, a Stam Mishnah, passing like the Tanakam against Rabbi Yehuda, and all you need is 3 dayanim. And yet, when it comes to Miyun, we paskin that all you need is Shnayim. So what are you going to do with Stam Mishnah? I mean, you're just telling me that halacha is Stam Mishnah. The Mishnah in Sanhedrin says Miyun Bishlosha, but now we're coming to the conclusion that Rav Nachman would say that Miyun Bishnayim, you only need 2. So Gemara answers, Hasam Chad Stama. The Hacha Trey Stami. In other words, we only have one Mishnah that has a Stam Mishnah like his Shita. In other words, we have Trey Stami. We have 2 Mishnayos, both of which support Tanakama, and they're both Stam Mishnahs. We have one here with regard to our Stam Mishnah. We have another one with regard to Chalitza. So we have 2 Stam Mishnahs, and that beats out 1 Stam Mishnah. The Gemara asks, Hasam with regard to Miyun, Nami Trey Stami. And we have 2 Mishnayos that require 3 dayanim for Miyun. Disnan, we have a Mishnah which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is here in Yevamot. Anyway, the Mishnah says, Miana Oshel Cholza Bifanav Yisa'ena. If a Ketana implements Miyun in front of a Chacham, then that chacham is allowed to marry her. Or alternatively, cholza yevama gedola liyavam b'fanav, in front of this chacham, yisayna, he's allowed to marry her. Now, normally, let's say, for example, if a woman takes a neder that she won't have any hana from her husband, then the Baal has to deliver a get. If she goes to a chacham mumche, who can be matir hanedarim, the yachid, he doesn't need another two, sheyimtzela pesach harata v'yidei zeyatil neder, v'lo motza hachacham pesach harata l'chein girsha baila. So the chacham says, I can't help you to annul your neder. And because of that, her husband gave her a divorce. Lo yisena chacham. The chacham is not allowed to marry her, because people will say that the chacham really could have nullified that neder with a pesach or a charata, but he didn't do so because he was hoping that the Baal would deliver a get to this woman, and then he'll be able to marry her. And this din applies in the case of gerushin, but in the case of miyun or chalitza, the chacham is allowed to marry her, and we have no chashash. We're not worried about people might say, oh, he encouraged the chalitza because he wanted to marry her, or he taught this Tana miyun and trained her to be mamayin so that he could marry her. Why? Mipnei shehu bebezdin. Now, what does that mean? Mipnei shehu bebezdin. I'll read to you the note here in the Masifti. Says Shelo haya otzo chacham yachid b'miyun ubechalitza shari bechalitza umiyin tzarch bezdin v'yein bezdin pochs mishlosh v'came to haya sham dayin yachid ein chosheshin shehitiru kidei sheyuchal loses osam neisha shlosha lo chashudim. You cannot cast an aspersion on a bezdin made up of three to say that they all, there was a collusion, they all agreed to pull off this lie. So the bottom line is, we don't understand miyun should require three people, because we have now two mishnayos, shesosmos, what we call a stam mishnah, that miyun requires shlosha dayanim. So what did Rav Nachman mean when he said, I'm going to paskin that miyun in front of two anoshim? I mean, that's not a psak like a stam mishnah, or even if you had two stam mishnayos. So why does Rav Nachman paskin like a stam mishnah? Ella, says the Gemara, Li'olam gam kishiyesh shtei stam mishnayos ein aloch kistam mishnah. Hasam, with regard to miyun, since trei stame, we only have two stam mishnayos, is therefore we don't need shlosha. That's as far as miyun is concerned. But hacha, with regard to chalitza, talsa stame, we have no less than three stam mishnahs. We have a mishnah in the second perek, and we have our two mishnahs that we mentioned here. Therefore, if Nachman Paskins that chalitza needs three dayanim because of all these stam mishnahs. Mari asks Michti, and with this we'll try to wrap it up. Ha stama, the ha stama. Whether it's in chalitza or in miyun, we have a stam mishnah that requires shlosha. And if we accept and adopt the principle of stam halachic stam mishnah, mali chad stam, mali trei stam, mali tla. So who cares if it's one stam mishnah, two stam mishnahs, or three? It shouldn't make any difference as far as the psak halacha is concerned. then you want to pass like 2 stam mishnahs. I would say let's pass like 1 stam mishnah, any stam mishnah. El Amar of Nachman Bar Yitzchak. When there's a stam mishnah, we don't necessarily paskin like the stam mishnah, and that's why we paskin that chalitza is bishlosha. Hoil ustam b'makom machlokes. So here we paskin that chalitza is bishlosha. Why? Because the Mishnah in Sanhedrin is a stam Mishnah that chalitza requires 3. And b'makom machlokes, meaning when Rabbi Yehuda himself disagrees in that Mishnah with regard to the din of chalitza, lo chalak umuchak shechazar bo sharei asak biyosa Mishnah v'lo chalak v'lo chilek v'lo chalak. So when you have a stam Mishnah that chalitza's kshera bishlosha, and in the makom hamachlokes, where Rabbi Yehuda himself rejects this idea, but that's because of a different din. As far as the din of chalitza is concerned, he doesn't disagree. So it must be that he rescinded his original position, and he agreed with the Mishnah. There's no cholek in the Mishnah, and all you need is 3 dayanim. To stand, as we learned in the Mishnah, smichas zikenim v'egla arufa b'shlosha divrei Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yehuda omer b'chamisha. The Mishnah continues and says, "Hachalitza v'amiyun b'shlosha." Below kapolig Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda didn't get up and say, like he said in a regular chalitza, that we need 5 dayanim. Shma mina hadar be Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda rescinded his original position, and he holds that chalitza must take place in the presence of what? Of 3 dayanim. And that's why Rav Nachman paskins like the Chachamim. Shma mina. So some of the more specific details about the dayanim and how the chalitza is performed in their presence, Emir Hashem will be able to study that. Let me just make a note of where we got up to. Here on Daf Kuf Aleph, Amid Beis, Amar Rav, which is about 2/3 of the way down. So let me take this opportunity to wish you all a meaningful Tisha B'Av, and maybe we'll meet at the Beis HaMikdash before Sunday. Halavai. Kol Tuv. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Lala Tov.
Laila
Som
Tov.
Kal.
Thank you so much.